The year was 2006, and Dulcinea and I had already completed a few paintings, and I wanted to do something that was darker and edgier and more ominous looking. I didn't know what that was going to look like. That was the problem, but I knew that I had this theme of something dark and ominous. I thought about it a bit, and I did a bunch of sketches, and it just didn't do anything for me. And then I thought of the two old classic movies that had the mood, the atmosphere that I wanted. One was The Hound of the Baskervilles. It was 1939, starring Basil Rathbone as Sherlock Holmes. I love the atmosphere and the tenseness and the darkness. And another old movie was The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And then I wanted to add destructive energy, and somehow I thought of pickup sticks getting blown apart by this swirling energy. And so now the painting is going to have 4 parts. Timbers in this ominous forest from those classic movies. And the timbers are going to be on a forest ground. And then there's going to be this swirling destructive energy. And then there would be a background light behind it, a fading light that also adds to this mood. So I had the color scheme, the lighting, and the composition. And then a friend suggested I build a clay model, and that certainly helped me visualize what I could do with it. And it's surprising how much it helped me. One of the big aha moments was the height of your eye looking into this model. If your eye is high looking down into the model, it gives you one feeling. If you're horizontal, it gives you another. But if your eye is lower looking up, then the model is more ominous. These timbers are more threatening and more ominous over your head. The question is, where do you go from here? Well, you create a mathematical model or mathematical simulation of this space for this painting. So I decided on a cubic space 100 inches wide, 100 inches tall, and 100 inches deep, where I was going to put all these timbers. And then the timbers would be like 4 or 5 inches on a side, and they would be wire framed and then a skin put on top of them. Then the next question was, where do you locate the timbers? And the clay model helped me a bit. And so I wrote a generative software system that would randomly locate timbers at different angles and different positions and different depths into this mathematical space. If it's like my clay model, everything is stuck in the ground. But the surprising thing was, after I ran my simulation, I had these timbers way up in the air over your head. And I go, oh, that's fantastic. It's so ominous looking. It's so threatening. Stepping back from an artist's perspective, you want the timbers that are closer to you with thicker paint and darker paint. And then as you go back in perspective, the further timbers, you want to have thinner paint on the canvas and also lighter. David LaFell always said, near is more, far is less. So near paint is thicker and far away is thinner paint. And so you'll see that work throughout all these timbers here. We should talk about the ground because that's important, which sets the tone and the foundation for all these timbers. I wanted the painting to be backlit. The ground then has to reflect where the light's coming from. So you can see here, as the light's coming from the back onto this ground, where the light hits it, it's lit. But where the ground is sloped forward, it has to be in the dark, in the shadow. Mathematically, the model reflects that. This was in December of 2007, a little sketch of timbers, and you can see the swirling energy. And then 2 weeks later, on January 1st, I did this other sketch, and I'm annotating on here where it's dark and where it's light and where the light source is. Now you're beginning to see the conceptual formation of the painting. So then the question is, how do you create that mathematical swirling? So in math, a curve is called a spline, and this is a helical spline. So in my 3D model, which is 100 inches on each side, I created that set of curves. And it looked boring because it was too repetitive. It just didn't have the texture and the energy that I wanted. I said, this isn't going to work. I got to start over and figure it out. I had used ants wandering around in the Capriccio painting to build stuff for me. It's called complex adaptive systems. But instead of a two-dimensional grid like in Capriccio, I said, I'm going to use 1-inch cubic space instead of 1-inch squares. I tell you, going from 2D to 3D is much more involved mathematically. Just like in a picnic, ants like breadcrumbs, and they might not discover them all right away. So my hope was that the ants would wander all around and then start locating breadcrumbs. When they find a breadcrumb, they put a pebble. These would become the brushstrokes of energy. With 10,000 ants, but 1 million possible 1-inch cubic locations, it was too slow. So then I said, well, I'll add pheromones. So when an ant found a breadcrumb, I radiated out some pheromones. The pheromones would attract ants to that one area of the helix, and now I was getting better clustering. And so I think the evolutionary process and the creative process, it's really important to know that it's just not a linear path, that there's a lot of iterations. There's backup and regrouping and rethinking and trying a different approach, trying a different attitude. And I end up with rolls of canvas. This whole creative process to me is fascinating. I love it. And I love being in that space. So we had the timbers and we had the ground and we had this swirling energy. And before all this other stuff is painted, it had to paint this background with this strong sense of backlight. Actually, the backlight took more time and energy than the other three. Conceptually, I decided to use topographic maps where the brightest area would be the inner topo circle. And then as you step out, I had 9 colors getting darker and darker on this topo map. And I was getting rectilinear artifacts in my grids, and it took me a long time to mathematically figure out how to get rid of these repeating patterns. You'll see there's no edge between the topos, just this softening of the brushwork. You dip in and then you fan it out. One of the things when it's backlit, this has to be dark, and then the edges where the light's hitting it have to be lighter. And so that's all a part of the math inside this giant computer simulation. I started this in 2006. I completed it in 2010, 4 years later. The painting is 66 inches high by 60 wide, and it was the largest painting I'd done to that point in time, so it's bigger than what the robot can reach. So I actually painted it in force. I would slide the canvas left and right, and then I'd slide the canvas up and then paint left and right. And then mathematically, I figured out how to do it such that you wouldn't see any seams. As a fusioneer combining art and science, or math and robotics, etc., I'm always wanting to explore and go where I haven't gone, push my envelope. You strive to keep evolving and to keep upgrading your skill sets, and this painting certainly challenged me in that way. I'm satisfied with it, and it's a thrill to see it now. So I'm always moving and progressing. That's the nature of striving and being creative and continuing to evolve and to iterate and to grow.